Hello, everyone, and welcome to this installment of my weekly Z Talk series. I'm excited today to have Trend Micro on the show and my good friend and colleague Joshua Ray, which I call Josh. Um, he's going to talk to you
Yes.
about Trend Micro and who they are, what they do, what makes them different, and why you should consider a Trend Micro in your environment. I'm sure all of you have heard of Trend Micro. But if you haven't, Josh will be sure to give you a nice overview of the technology and why you should have that deployed in your environment. So, without any further ado, we get this thing going. Josh, I'm handing it over to you, my friend. The mic is yours, and I'm sure my viewers will have a great time listening. So, that's all yours.
Perfect. Well, thanks so much, Henry. I really appreciate you reaching out to me. I know I thought about this a little bit the last few days when you asked me to do a little bit of a trend overview. I think the best way to attack it is I love to talk a little bit about trend as a company. I think we have a unique story in the market. I want to look just abstractly, briefly about the technological issues that we're addressing the most today, as well as kind of changes in the threat landscape. And then I'll talk just a little bit about like the technologies we're developing.
Okay.
Um, so Trend is a really interesting company for anyone that doesn't know their history. They're founded around the same time as like McAfee and Symantec was. Our founder saw an opportunity to really open up the Asian market. And so we're actually the largest security vendor in all of Asia. I think we bounce between 2 and 4 in Europe, and similarly in the U.S. We have a huge growing footprint, and so we're actually one of the largest vendors, and we're able to affect a very large part of the security landscape. What's great with us is we've been owned by the same people since the very beginning, and we've been very financially solvent for many, many years. And even when I started, I didn't realize until I kind of got into the weeds that the result of that is our products are almost always designed with long-term intentions behind them, and with the idea of how are we going to have continuity between the different pieces we touch. And so what that's done for us is that we've created a series of products that are able to tie in together very well. Um, we have cohesion between them, and as I get into some of the technologies we're working today, we'll talk a bit about that. But it's made just for a very strong, long-lasting brand that's been able to do a lot in the industry, and we're really able to focus in on innovation because we're so financially solvent and have these other things going on. Everything we do, we're like, how is this going to affect us over the next 5 years? We're not as worried about kind of the next quarter, just in the way that we're designed. So when we're looking at what are the things that Trend are working on, that there's two huge things if we look over the last few years that have been a big influence on the technologies we're making. One is if you look at the threat landscape over the last 5 years, especially with the rise of ransomware, there's been a huge financial motive into hacking. Whereas, the malicious attacks of the past maybe were from an activist group or small groups. More and more, we're seeing very sophisticated organizations within the last year or two, even things like, you know, uh, hacking organizations outsourcing pieces of the work to other people and coming up with these very like dynamic attack vectors. It's something that we have to really start looking at a lot more aggressively. At the same time that's been happening, we've also been seeing within organizations huge changes in technology. So whereas once again 5 to 10 years ago, it was large server infrastructures within a facility that the company owns, very siloed, perhaps DevOps. It wasn't too long ago in the large scale of things that the CISO position wasn't even something you would see at every company. Um, what we're seeing today is um, a rapid velocity increase of the development projects internally, a lot more connectivity between the different parts of the organization, and frankly, the information being in a lot different places than they would have traditionally been. Utilization of cloud resources like AWS and Azure, movement from, it was physical servers to VMware to now we're seeing a lot of work with Docker containers. serverless information that's out there. And at the same time, you have that going on while the DevOps is trying to push out new products in a lot of organizations, and they need to be able to rapidly make sure that the things that they're building are secure as well.
Right.
So that's the backdrop of where Trend's products are, and really what we're looking at. So to look at the Trend portfolio and where we're going, what we've been doing. One of the big things that we've done over the last couple of years, especially, is we took what used to be kind of some disparate products. So things, once upon a time, if you wanted, say, something like data loss prevention, you would go find people that do focus in on data loss prevention, or you buy a product for something like that. The antivirus had a tendency to kind of stand on its own two legs. You might have things like encryption or device control, or there's a lot of these various functions that people legitimately need, but they would tend to have a lot of vendors. One thing that Trend is focused in on real heavily is we've taken and we've done a lot of consolidation, and we've created a lot of cloud resources as well. And so where that's very helpful is if you think back, the last big international outbreak that people probably talk about the most was like the big WannaCry incident, right, a couple of years ago. And so one example that I focus in on healthcare accounts, in the UK, there was a group of like 24 hospitals, huge ransomware attack, they're down to pen and paper, very, very big impact. So for Trend, when we saw this happen and we looked, that particular exploit was something that was known and had been protected. Across our base, people tended to do very, very well. But in the few occasions where we would get a call, it was almost always an on-premise product that hadn't been updated in a number of years, or products that weren't being used or configured. And so we were already on this path, but we've really since then moved to where we have a lot more of these cloud-based solutions. All of our endpoint now, you never have to host a server or do any sort of updating. It's all done in the background. As we come out with new technologies, those can just be integrated directly in. So instead of going through what was once a cumbersome process of installing servers and tying different things together, all that's kind of done for you. And so that's been real relevant on the endpoint end of the house here, where you see now we're moving into like the EDR type technologies, where historically you would see that a piece of malware was blocked, and great, okay, I'm glad something was stopped. But for a number of organizations today, they want to be able to go in and say, okay, well, what type of malware was it? Where did it go? What did it touch? What did it do? And so something that we're looking at is that is information that has a lot of value for organizations, but it's also can get very complex. Even in your Fortune 100 organizations, you have a limited number of human resources to be able to do like investigations, things of that nature. And so we've taken these technologies and then tried to kind of make some of that process a lot easier, and while adding that in as well. And so that's a big piece that we've done on that side of the house. Because our products are tied kind of across different realms. Something that's unique to us at the moment is we can tie endpoint detection with the email part of the environment. Many organizations are moving to Office 365, so we're doing a lot of work in there. And so that's one big side of the fence that we're working on. The other with our current products today, and then we'll pause and talk a little, is I mentioned these people moving into more of these really hybrid, server infrastructure environments where they probably still have a number of resources on premise. It's not uncommon to talk to people, even today in 2020, that have one or two old like Windows 2003 servers that Microsoft hasn't even, serviced in a number of years. And so we are still able to protect those resources, while also through the same kind of dynamic system, having the ability to protect everything as you move it into the cloud or multi-cloud. And so for that infrastructure manager that has this very real problem of, data needs to move into better, more robust places, we have a way to make that happen where they know that the security piece is going to continue to be there. And then we can also tie that in with the other teams. So with DevOps, we have the ability for, as they're developing applications. They can, do security checks in real time. Most recently, we've added on a piece called cloud conformity, where these large organizations as well, they may have hundreds of instances they spin up and down all the time, managing those to make sure there's not unsecure ones that perhaps have not been properly managed. We have a platform to make that process a lot easier. So we're really trying to look at this kind of holistic problem of how do you have a very strong threat protection piece while also addressing the dynamic changes of your people. The final note I'll say too, where Trend is, I think, really stands out, is if you look at like third-party testing. We've always been a very engineering-centric organization. We focus very, very heavily into threat detection, identification. We pretty consistently, if you look at like your Gartner Magic Quadrant or your Forrester, we've been in the top quadrant in endpoint for a number of years. We're in the top for our cloud protection products. And then we've also have an organization, it's called ZDI, but basically we do threat bounties as well. So I don't know about 2019, but in 2018, I think Trend actually identified more threats that Microsoft unfolded, like issues with products, and then even they themselves had known about. And so through the mixture of focusing heavily on threats, focusing on technologies that really meet the customer where their need point is, and then making the investment to make sure as these new things come out there, we have ways to incentivize the detection and stopping of those things. I think it's created a really strong ecosystem, and that's why we've had a lot of success, and we've been continuing to grow very rapidly, over the last number of years.
That's awesome, and I've seen that growth because I've been a Trend Micro fan for many, many, many years, so I'm glad to see that the platform has evolved. You have enterprise products, and so here we are. We're sitting in June. Anything coming up from a promotional standpoint? Do you have anything in the pipe for any end of year, end of quarter? I don't know how Trend Micro's processes work, but I'm sure that my clients, especially in this climate of businesses, either suffering or closing, or at the very least being a little bit more conservative with their cash. Anything out there incentive wise that we could talk about, or is it something that we leave perhaps to a conversation with the client as we're designing the solution?
Right.
Um,
So, I mean, it's kind of two-part. We are doing a lot right now, particularly with COVID. As I'd mentioned previously, I work in healthcare, and so being able to address the huge influx of now remote workers, as well as we're at a time where there's a few kind of large security manufacturers going through a little bit of flux, that's resulted in a lot of people coming and starting brand new conversations with Trend. We definitely have some options out there. As we're finishing the first half, I'm reluctant to give like real specifics because I know that some of that will shift in the second half, but I know we've been able to, in some instances, offer some free months of service. We have some very competitive pricing. For me, I work real heavily in kind of the commercial space, kind of in that mid-market. One of the biggest advantages I see consistently when I talk to people is even more so than pricing. Our pricing tends to be very good for what you get, but even more so the fact we've kind of continued to add in a lot of technologies, integrate a lot of things together for the compliance or centric organizations that I deal with. They're able to oftentimes consolidate through multiple vendors with one of our suites of products that can just do things that they may be paying for 3 or 4 different people to accomplish, and do that in a very effective way. And so I think that's the number one place where I've been able to make a real cost benefit argument to my clients.
that's awesome. Well, I look forward to engaging our clients a lot more with Trend Micro Technologies. I know we have one on the table that we're working with today, so I'm excited to see how that evolves. And going forward, I hope that my viewers see some great value here with Trend Micro and what they're bringing to the market. Josh laid out a nice overview of Trend and his insights as to what's out there in the market that they can solve many of those problems. So I would urge you to reach out to us. Let's have a conversation around trend, around technology, around security, and see if we can be of help. So we're here to serve. Josh is my go-to guy here. Again, he works on the healthcare side, but he has counterparts of trend that handle other sectors of the market. So if you're in health,
Exactly.
so if you're in healthcare, reach out to me. I'll get a hold of Josh, and we'll put together a demo, a discussion, whatever it is that you need to get your organization secure. And with that, Josh, I want to thank you for your time today and for a great presentation and overview of trend. I'm excited to work with you and continue to work with you going forward. And I really appreciate your time today.
Thanks, Henry. Yeah, thanks so much for having me, and look forward to many deals in the future together. Thanks. You take care.
And to my viewers, have a great day. I hope you enjoyed this segment of technology with Trend Micro, and take care. Bye bye, everybody.